Libby, thank you as always, and welcome everybody. It's nice to see that we've got a really strong turnout today, and as always we have a very packed agenda, so I won't delay us too long. But I thought I'd just start by saying that it's pleasing to see that we now have a very positive roadmap that the government announced around the pandemic, and we'll hear a little bit more from Matt Lenny shortly in terms of some of the more up-to-date public health announcements. But before we do that, I just thought it was really helpful to see that we've got a roadmap and we've got 4 key tests, whether that's the vaccinations, whether that's understanding where we are with hospitalisations and deaths, infection rates, and indeed the assessment of risk around new variants. All of those, I think, provide a lot of clarity, and with a timetable of activities, we can now really start to plan our way forwards. And I'm sure Dave will be talking a little bit more about that from an airport perspective as well. And clearly, John, when we talk around tourism and how that's going to unlock through the course of the summer. Yesterday was the budget, and I think it was a mixed set of messages as far as we can see. We'll perhaps share our link in the chat, but Business West has put together an initial response, and I think we were really pleased to see that there was a strong support ongoing around the pandemic and providing the extension to furlough and to bring self-employed people into the support package. But it was very clear to us that there was a lot of political manoeuvrings around the levelling up agenda, and we know that in our region there is a lot still to do around the levelling up agenda, but much of that effort and funding appears to have been directed to the northern regions. And perhaps most disappointingly for me yesterday was that we didn't secure a free port. We put together a very, very strong bid in conjunction with appropriate landowners. It had cross-party political support and was well led by colleagues in the Combined Authority. And we'll try and find out as to more of the reasons behind that. We certainly had a compliant bid, but disappointing nonetheless. Just for other news, the Western Gateway, led by Catherine Bennett, who spoke at one of our previous meetings, are looking to enhance their business representation, and they have 2 vacancies for their partnership board. Again, we can share the link, but please do, if you feel you can contribute, please do put your name in the hat. We are really looking for strong representation from the West of England region in that initiative. A couple of days ago, Business West were really thrilled that we received B Corp status. We were one of a number of organisations in the region to have been acknowledged and accredited. We think that that sets us up really strongly to define our purpose and to be really clear to our stakeholders that we've got a strong public interest and community interest in the way in which we organise our business. And then finally, we have 2 people who have been very long-standing members of our community, John Hirst and James Freeman, both of whom are retiring. And without further ado, I'm going to ask Roger Key to just say a few words about James, and we'll talk about John a little bit later if that's okay. But Roger, if I could bring you in, and we would really like to say thank you to James, who's contributed so much in recent times.
Thank you, Richard, and I'm very happy to mark James's retirement on behalf of the initiative, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. I'll be very brief because you've got a packed agenda, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves that James returned to the West Country in 2014 to take up his current post as Managing Director of First West of England. When he arrived, I don't think, if I'm being honest, that First reputation was too good at the time, and he's transformed the organisation to the one we now know. He's secured a modernisation of the fleet. They now have 600 vehicles, 1,800 employees. James introduced what we lovingly know as the poo bus, run on biomethane from human and household waste produced locally. And first fleet of biomethane buses is now one of the largest in the country. James' other achievements: introduction of first ticket cashless system, which has been particularly helpful during the pandemic. and James secured the contract, so First West of England now operate the 3 Metrobus routes in the region. And all of that added up so that annual growth, there's been annual growth in patronage at record levels, bucking a generally national downward trend in patronage. If I could sum up James's achievement, I'm going to quote from his managing director at First Bus, Giles Fernley. He said, "We've been very fortunate to have had James on the First Bus team. An inspirational leader, he's made a tremendous impact across the West of England business with our stakeholders, customers, and of course his colleagues. Through his time, the role of the bus and the contribution it is making to the economic, social, and environmental agendas has never been better understood across the West of England." I think we'll all miss James, and I'll raise my hand, and I hope others will do, to show you your appreciation for James's work at First West of England over the last 7 years. Thank you very much indeed, James, and we wish you well in retirement.
Thank you, Roger. And I just want to echo those. You've been a real stalwart, James, and made a huge impact. And we wish you well with your retirement. Thank you very much indeed. Right, without further ado, if that's okay, I'm going to hand over to Victoria Matthews, our initiative manager, who's just going to give us a brief update on our activities. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everybody, and welcome. We have a fantastic lineup of really interesting speakers and topics today, so I'll keep this brief. So hopefully you're all aware we've got a very busy electoral period coming up here in the West of England in May, with 3 elections taking place. So on the back of the mayoral manifesto survey that we circulated to members last month, we have now produced 2 business manifestos for the Bristol mayoral election and the West of England Combined Authority mayoral election. So we're just polishing these off, and they'll be circulated to yourselves shortly. And what they really do is essentially set out what we as a business community want to see from the elected mayors to ensure that our region's economy continues to recover. And on the back of that, we're also delivering a business hustings event in partnership for Centre for Cities on the 28th of April. So we'd encourage you all to come along to that if you're interested, or if there are members of your team that are interested, to the community to ask questions, hear from the candidates, and give them a bit of scrutiny as well. And of course, ongoing as ever is our economic recovery work here in the region. This is still one of our main priorities here at BCCI. So of course, for the city and the wider economy, our role is to ensure that we recover greener, cleaner and fairer for everybody. So we're continuing to work alongside our members and key stakeholders to ensure that this region recovers. So that includes working cross-sectoral and with different bodies like WECA and One City. So we'll keep you up to date with that as well. And then the good news is that Bristol has finally announced and approved the full business case for the small CASD for the clean air zone. So that went through Cabinet last week. So the small CASD is something that we've been arguing for a while. That's not to say that we still don't have concerns with certain parts of the scheme. So for example, the inclusion of the portway, which surprised us a little bit. So, you know, we are still actively engaging with Bristol City Council and the officers, and this is in dialogue with our MPs and central government as well to ensure that the scheme works for everybody. And on that, we are also engaging with the council to ensure the mitigation package works as well for businesses in the city. So making sure it's workable and generous given the needs of businesses and people. And then finally, on the topic of climate, we at Business West, we're looking at COP26 and the different opportunities that will come from that. So we're looking at leveraging the opportunities from COP26 and the G7 that's coming up as well. So again, we'll keep you up to date with that and let you know if there are any opportunities that arise from that. And then just on my final slide, if that's okay, just wanted to let you know about some of the initiative and the wider city events as well. So as usual, our initiative meetings tend to be first Thursday of the month at 11:30. We also have our roundtables coming up as well. But with that, you can see some of the themes that we've got coming up. So active travel, mental health, diversity, inclusion agendas, etc. And then next week is International Women's Day. So we're partnering with a few different organisations across the city to deliver events. So they're listed there and I'll pop the links in the chat. Alongside that, we also have a blog series from some of our female members. So for example, one came out today from Louise Mitchell, CEO of Bristol Beacon. So that's next week, so do keep an eye out for those. And then finally, the Bristol One City gathering. They come around quickly. It's on March the 12th at 10 a.m. So if any members are interested in that, again, an invite will be circulated. If anybody has any feedback or questions for James, Nina, or myself, or the team, then please do always get in touch. And that'll probably just about do it. Thank you.
Excellent, Victoria. Thank you very much for sharing that with us all. Lots to look forward to. So it's now a real pleasure to invite Matt Lenny to join us. Matt is the Director of Public Health at North Somerset Council, and will just take us through a bit more of a detailed overview of the response to the pandemic. So over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and nice to see everyone on the call today. I'll try and run through these slides quite quickly. I won't bore you with the absolute ins and outs of a pandemic response, but in the first slide, I thought it might just be helpful for people to see the types of response that is run by the local authority, the sort of breadth of things that we get involved in working alongside our partners. So in terms of actually managing infections, we do a lot of work around outbreak management. Some of you will be experiencing that if you've had clusters or outbreaks within your business settings. But we also work with other places like care homes and schools and any other places where people gather to try and help get in as quickly as possible, reduce the risk of onward transmission and make sure people are isolating and reducing risk appropriately. We've also been doing lots of work around the testing. So symptomatic testing has been in place for some time now. You will also be experiencing access to lateral flow testing, with a number of businesses being able to sign up for that opportunity to do it within their own workforce, or indeed the community testing access that we have put in place in North Somerset. For example, we've got sites in Portishead, in Nailsea and in Weston-super-Mare at the moment, where people can get regular testing, that's twice a week testing, just to see whether there's any unknown spread of the virus through asymptomatic spread. We're also seeing extensions in those areas. So with students going back to school next week, a number of you as parents or carers may also be accessing bits of testing as well. So it's going to be quite a fast moving situation, but by all means, always check in with your local authority. We can give you the latest update on what testing is available where and who it's most appropriate for as well. Alongside the testing, when you identify the cases, then of course, obviously isolation is important. We do a lot of work now around contact tracing. We've got locally enhanced services in local authorities working alongside NHS Test and Trace to try and make sure we reach as many people as possible and that the appropriate support and advice is given to people quickly. We're also doing work around how do you work with people in terms of, excuse me, my phone there. How do you work with people, especially in a time where we've been going a long time? There's elements of fatigue, and with a roadmap, some people may choose to release certain behaviours a bit earlier than the roadmap might suggest. So it's that sort of contract with the public. How do you stick by the same key behaviours and do it in a managed way so that we don't risk any gains that we are currently achieving in terms of infection rates going down and the wider benefit of the vaccine rollout? We've also been doing quite a lot around enforcement. So that's educate and inform as much as possible, but where necessary, working either through our regulatory services powers or with the police. Quite often with the police, there's a sort of collaboration to deal with those areas where people are not complying with the rules, no matter how many times we may have tried to get those across. We also do lots around surveillance and intelligence. So this is trying to make sure we're responding to patterns of disease, but also anticipating areas where we might need to take action and try and prevent risks occurring if possible. And the other two big areas, the first one is vaccination, and I'll come on to say a bit more about that. Huge programme that is run by the NHS, but in local authorities we've been trying to support in terms of local site and amplifying the messaging around getting people to vaccinations as quickly as possible and targeting messages to those people who are least likely to take it up, either through access issues or possible vaccine hesitancy. And then finally, our community response work has been really valuable to us throughout the pandemic. So in North Somerset, we have North Somerset Together, which is a great alliance of town, parish councils and different voluntary and community sector organisations working together to try and meet local needs. And we've been trying to facilitate that work, and I would pay a lot of tribute to the people involved in that. So just moving on to the next bit, which is a map as of yesterday. And I've put the link here because I'm sure the slides will be shared, but if you want to know what the latest is at a more sort of local level in terms of case numbers, this is the best place to go because you can zoom in and you can go as close as you want to in terms of where your business or your home is located. Thankfully, the colours on this map have changed a lot. There was a lot of dark blue not that long ago, particularly in early January. And what we're seeing now is moving into much lighter blues and greens, and even those white spaces now where actually there's a very small number of cases. So this data is presented by medium super output area, which is a population of about 7,000 people. But that's the lowest level that the national data goes down to. But the overall message is numbers are going down, that is being sustained. Slowing a little bit at the moment, but you would expect it to as you get to the lower numbers. But thankfully, we've made a lot of progress since the beginning of January. And then on the next slide is just a quick look at that from the point of view of North Somerset. You can see how our numbers have gone up and down the waves back in November, and then all the way through to another peak in January at over 400 per 100,000. It says 54.9, we're actually below 50 per 100,000 now on the very latest data. And the bottom line is the rate for the over 60s, which was always the greatest concern because of the increased clinical risk for those individuals, higher chance of hospitalisation and death. So both numbers are coming down significantly and our risk is going down as well. Just moving through to a number of cases, just so emphasising good progress on the next slide, good progress in the west of England. And the southwest generally is one of the, if you like, best performing regions in the country in this area. We're seeing some more sticking of cases in other places like London, the southeast, parts of the Midlands. So hopefully we'll continue on that. Broadly, we can assume that this trajectory will continue, especially with the rollout of the vaccine. As that continues, more people are protected. But I guess the thing, and people will be live to this issue, the variants of concern, we've had two separate incidents, if you like, in that area, one which involved Bristol and South Gloucestershire, and most recently another variant in South Gloucestershire on its own discovered. I'd like to pay tribute to the work of my colleagues in those two areas for the hugely efficient way in which local testing was stood up and achieved a good response from the local population. I think there's some assurance there that we're not seeing onward transmission, that those clusters of cases have been dealt with appropriately, but it's something where we will have to continue to keep our eyes open and respond quickly as we need to. And what we have done, I suppose, through those examples, learned a lot about how we do that effectively and work with the public as well, including business colleagues. So I guess I would also point to the fact that we continually get more encouraging information about vaccine, both in terms of reducing health risks, that hospitalisation and death challenge, but also potentially interrupting transmission as well. So we're learning as we go because of the speed of the rollout of the vaccine, but everything that comes out tends to be positive, which is great, and that increases our confidence that the roadmap is something that can continue and we can slowly release a number of different activities as planned. So yeah, good news, and let's hope that continues. And then on the final slide, just because people are often interested in around vaccination, how is it going? Well, the numbers are good in North Somerset. They're good across certainly Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire as our local health community. So our colleagues in NHS England publish a statistical bulletin every Thursday, and that also breaks down to, so back to the map, that medium super output area, you can see the proportion of people vaccinated at that geography level, if that's what you'd like to do. But our local clinical commissioning group produces a useful kind of weekly summary of what's happening in our area. It talks about sites where people can access it and what progress we're making. And again, this is a place where, you know, thankfully we're one of the top performers in the country. So things are going very well in the west of England in terms of rollout of vaccine. And finally, just to reflect on the fact that it continues, but confirmation that the government or the Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation has confirmed that it would be an age-based approach rather than occupational groups, which created a bit of reaction in some quarters, but there's a clear rationale for that. So I think we just have to try and get through those age groups as quickly as possible. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. That's a really helpful and detailed briefing. So lots for us to take away, and actually some good data points for people to investigate as well. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to John Hirst, but I'd just like to say that John's been one of the stalwarts of our community for a very long time. And it's a real pleasure to invite you to say a few words today, John, just to talk a little bit more about Visit West and tourism. then we'll sure celebrate with you in a few minutes. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I'm pleased to be called a stalwart. I've been called a lot worse than that in the past, so thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to share some good news with you. And Matt, so that was a positive presentation regarding your situation, and I'm pleased to advise that I've had my vaccination now, so feeling good about that, and want to share some positive news with you about Destination Bristol. So if I could just say, we're transforming into Visit West, and I will explain a little bit more about that over the next few minutes. I've got a total of 10 slides, and then I'd just like to give a quick summary at the end. So I'm conscious of time as well, so rattle through at pace on this one. So the great news we have is about a new regional destination management organisation, and that is the one that currently will replace the existing Destination Bristol. We're transforming into a new organisation, new name called Visit West. And we're planning to include in Visit West, Bristol, Bath, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. Negotiations are underway and we hope to launch in April of 21, which is very soon. So next, please. So the main aim is to attract more visitors to this region, and I stress the word region, and I'll also stress the fact that we'd like them to stay longer and obviously spend more money. That's the whole aim, really. So in 2019, Destination Bristol had its best year, and the visitor economy was valued at £1.5 billion for this Destination Bristol area, which interestingly has always covered Bristol and South Gloucestershire. And then as we move from the good news into, I think what we all know, that 2020 was a year when we all suffered from COVID-19, and the figures that for us yet aren't released, but they're not going to be good. So we need to move on with a speedy recovery process, which I'm sure we will as soon as the opportunity arises. So moving on, extended negotiation process. Well, that's an interesting heading on the slide there. And one of my colleagues said they felt that we'd started this in 2002. I think that was probably a bit of an exaggeration, but we have been looking to expand the footprint that we've been working in for a long time. And I think there'd been lots of barriers in the past, but the time is right for us to take this bold step. And there will be benefits for everyone. So this is really good news right across the region and right across all the different parts of our sector. We will all benefit from the expansion and the new company of Visit West, the new name that we're introducing. So let's talk a little bit about the significance. DMO is Destination Management Organisation, and we will be one of the main ones nationally. And that's interesting when you think about it, that Bristol on its own wasn't as big as it could be, obviously, and with the new partnership of Bristol Bath, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire, we'll be in a position where we'll be one of the main DMOs in the whole of the UK. And there is a DMO review being taking place at the moment nationally, and we're ahead of the game on that one, which is really good news. So if successful with the new organisation, we'll significantly increase the value of the visitor economy by attracting additional visitors to the region. And I think if we try and summarise it by saying we'll have less day trips and more overnight stays, then there will be more money coming into the region. And I think it's fair to say that sometimes international visitors in the past have flown into London, they've taken a coach and gone to Stonehenge, Bath, and then Oxford all in one day, and then back to London. So there's not much in the way of spend on those visits, and we need to get people to come here, flying into Bristol rather than London, if they're international visitors, and then staying for anything up to a week. We can provide them with lots of things to do in that whole period. And importantly, also, the increasing the number of jobs in the sector. And in my wrap-up at the end, I'll just talk to you about the numbers involved in that one. Okay, moving on. So the benefits, it's easier to promote our region to the international market, and the distance between Bristol and Bath is nothing as far as the international visitors are concerned. And you know, they will just visit both really easily, and we will try and get them to use the most green opportunity to travel between the cities. The benefits will also include improved use of resources and expertise, and we can be more financially effective, delivering higher standards across the region. One thing I've learned since I became involved in tourism in this region, there is so much for people to do, and what's more, that number of things to do is increasing all the time. So moving on. The next steps of the process. Well, we will try and finalise this agreement for a launch of Visit West early in April this year. We've made some great progress in the last 2 weeks. We need to consolidate and then move on quickly. So we've another important meeting this afternoon, and then hopefully a series next week so that we can actually effectively launch in April, as I said. We want to grow the region's visitor economy. And as a person that spent most of their life in retail, moving into the visitor economy in 2008, I've noticed how the potential is there, but people don't fully realize it. And I think we just got to get that message over. There is so much room for growth in the visitor economy in this region. And I think I will just begin to wrap up, but I want to just, before I talk to this slide here, I just want to say a few words about Destination Bristol. It's 21 years old now. It's a membership organisation working closely with the City Council. We've got a team of 15 people, mostly part-time. And if you haven't ever checked the Visit Bristol website, please do so. The numbers have grown dramatically, the visitor numbers have grown dramatically, and it's our main attack tool. So, you know, that and combined with our social media, it's affordable, and it's something that we've actually used very effectively to promote the city, and we'll do so with our new website for the combined area. We'll use that much more in the future. So when we start looking at growth potential, I think this year is going to hopefully really be very, very busy. And I know it was mentioned earlier on about the potential for hotel bookings increasing this year. I think it'll be domestic visitors this year, and I think the international visitors will start to come back next year, but we probably won't get them back in the numbers we've had until 23 or 24. I stress again the importance of the airport, and we need to bring people in the most sustainable way possible, and Dave will be talking more about that after me. Just to fill you in on where we stand as far as Destination Bristol is concerned, we're not just focusing on tourism, we also concentrate on business improvement districts, and hopefully we'll have 3 by the end of April, and their aim is to improve and promote the place. So we could talk for hours on that, and I'm not going to. And wrapping up now, I'll just say, I think it's fair to say realistically we're in a bad place at the moment. Visitor numbers to the city have dropped to an all-time low, and we need to get this right. And as soon as we're in a position where the coast is clear and that we're given the go-ahead, I'm sure that Bristol will be, and Bristol and the region will be hugely successful, and people will come back in great numbers. We know that the regional product is good. We offer so much, and when safe to do so, we will definitely prosper. So my last slide here is about Visit Britain and Visit West, and I think this is important. It's a groundbreaking move nationally and regionally. Visit Britain have been hugely supportive of our proposal to do this, and we will get financial benefits from them because of what we've done. we're playing their game, and I think it is the right one to do. So there will be no more financial support for single cities. I think that it was made clear to me by the chief executive of Visit Britain, sorry, that if we ask for more money for Bristol, then the answer will be no. We need to ask on behalf of the region. And thank you. So it's, as we said at the beginning, it's now a goodbye from me. And I've had an absolute ball working in Bristol. I remember the time when I had the interview, and I think John Savage is here today. He was on my interview panel. I remember it very well in Berkeley Square, in one of the hotels there, sorry, one of the offices there. I've been able to watch the progress in this city, and many positive memories. The negative memories are very small. So thank you, everyone, and especially to our team within Destination Bristol. I've been fortunate I inherited a good team, and we've developed them, and I can't understate the role that John Savage played in the development of that team and of me over those years. So I'm off now to do 2 new challenges, and I've been interested in golf and marathons for many years. So my aim, and this is my last point, Richard, I want to do a marathon for every year that I've lived. So I've done 30, and I'm way behind on that, so I need to catch up on that one. And my aim is to play a round of golf with the same number of shots, if you like, as my age. So I've got a lot of work to do on that one. I might get there when I'm 80, if God willing. So
John,
that's it.
John, that was brilliant. I mean, just so exciting actually around what we're doing with Visit West. I think that's an incredible achievement, and it's going to be very positive for us in the future. And just to express our thanks, thank you so much. But I think we ought to check in then with the boss for an end of assignment update. So if I could ask John to just come in and see how John Hirst has done. Over to you, Mr. Savage.
I think a few more years we'd have kept him on, you know, a bit more probation, but I can't understand why he's retiring so young. But I thought a lot about it this morning. I give you all a piece of homework. Rudyard Kipling wrote, amongst many other things, a wonderful poem called The 1,000th Man. It's a good description of Mr. Hirst. It's a compliment, John. All the best.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, John. And many people have really benefited from your input over the years. Right, I am now going to hand over to Dave Lees, Chief Exec of Bristol Airport. So Dave, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard. And I just wanted to echo the thoughts of John, and just thank John Hirst as well personally. Done a fantastic job, and look forward to hearing how you get on with your marathons. So I wanted to talk about the airport, and importantly the future of the airport, which is inextricably linked to our aims and journey towards becoming a more sustainable business. But I felt, if we could just have the first slide, that it was important to talk about where we are today. First of all, it would be remiss of me not to just bring you briefly up to date, because I imagine probably most of us haven't travelled by air for at least a year, unless you've had an essential journey. So this not going to test anybody in terms of what the 3 tests are for travelling at the moment. And therefore, it won't come as any surprise that certainly at the moment, we're experiencing levels of activity only 1% of what we would normally have at this time of year. So we have been hugely impacted. We have been maintaining services at the moment, just from a domestic perspective, for critical connectivity and supporting businesses and people travelling for business reasons, including Hinkley Point. We have a number of workers coming into the region from other parts of the UK, but also for things such as organ transfer, and also we house a helicopter operation for Western Power, which provides services checking on the high voltage transmission lines. But our number one priority has always been around the safety of the passengers and our colleagues, and that will remain so as we come out of the pandemic as well. So we're working with government. You'll have seen the announcement by the PM in terms of the stepped approach out of this. I think it's fair to say, quite rightly so, international aviation sits at the tail end of that, and that will have to be informed through a risk-based approach. The Global Travel Task Force met for the first time earlier this week, co-chaired by Matt Hancock, and grant chaps, and that's got a very clear set of terms of reference, with the aim of reporting back on the 12th of April, with a view to opening up international aviation no earlier than the middle of May. But obviously that will be dependent on our international partners. I think it's fair to say across Europe there is a degree of growing consensus around having some form of international vaccination passporting system. Whether that will be able to deliver at the same pace as the vaccination process, I'll leave you to decide. Personally, I believe it will be more aligned to a bilateral agreement. But the one thing is very clear is that people do want to fly again, and you'd have seen the statistics in front of you here. You know, nearly 90% of people do want to fly. Over the course of the next 12 months, the latent reasons why they don't want to fly, really around the uncertainty around international borders, the type of restrictions which might be in place, that is the constraining element. So, you know, there is a huge amount of pent-up demand, which we're still looking to service, and including inbound tourism that John's just picked up upon. If I could have the next slide. So this just gives our view, because there is no single forecast exactly how the recovery will look like. So I'm sure for those other businesses who have been severely impacted to the same degree, perhaps in the broader hospitality sector, we'll also be looking at similar kind of scenarios at the moment. But we believe there will be a bounce back because of the pent-up demand and returning to the 2019 levels of traffic, probably in the order of somewhere in about the next 2 to 4 years, depending on, you know, the pace of that recovery, which in part is entwined with the overall GDP forecasts for UK PLC. Next slide, please. But importantly, whilst COVID for ourselves has been all-consuming, the much bigger issue at hand for ourselves is around delivering a more sustainable future. And at the forefront of that is very much our focus around becoming a lower carbon airport and a lower carbon industry. And I'll talk about, you know, those two elements, because I think it's fair to say there's some things which reside within our direct control, those things immediately at the airport which we can make a direct impact on, and there's some things which we can influence as a sector. So you'll be aware of our targets. Some of you will no doubt be aware that we've set out our carbon plan to become carbon neutral by 2025. We're well progressed along that, but also to become net carbon zero by 2050 at the latest. And importantly, this is a journey. It's not just a single destination, and I'm sure, you know, we'll all move progressively as the business community towards each and every single one of these goals, and probably to a carbon negative position in the future. But that journey started many years ago, and you can see, you know, we've actually made a 50% reduction per passenger in terms of what we call our scope 1 and 2 emissions. Those are the ones which we can directly influence at the airport, you know, your heating and ventilation and all vehicles at the airport, all of those items. So a 50% reduction. But within our carbon plan, we've also highlighted other areas. So we've moved to be now sourcing all of our electricity from renewable sources. We're increasing our on-site generation. We've got a target of 25% by 2025. We're currently just over 5% at the moment. We're undertaking the install of our next solar array at the airport, which will take us into about 11 to 12% by Q2 this year, and then progressively moving forward over the course of the next 2 to 3 years to reach that 2025 target. And importantly for us, we've offset all of the car journeys to and from the airport. And I appreciate offsetting isn't the final solution, but it is a way of bridging forward to the future. And we're the first airport, we believe, in the world who's actually done that, let alone in the UK or across Europe. Next slide, please. Importantly, though, and the bigger issue, which is always, you know, thrown up at us to look at in the mirror, is around what we'd call scope 3. And particularly scope 3 in regard to aviation emissions. And perhaps not surprisingly, you would expect me to highlight a graph which is showing that the industry is most certainly becoming more efficient. Having worked in the sector now for 30 years, the days of, you know, much more noisy and less efficient aircraft are fortunately well behind us. And with the advent of new aircraft types, including the Boeing MAX, is making very, very substantial improvements in terms of operating efficiency. Now, we know these, are incremental improvements, and we're working with industry, and we're fortunate enough in our region to have some, world-renowned companies who are working at trying to strive forward to reach, fully renewable sources of energy for aircraft in the future. And we've actually partnered and were successful around the future of flight, for electric flight, and also for hydrogen, working with GKN and also EasyJet in the region. So, very much at the forefront of our mind is working collaboratively with other companies and the real intellect which we've got, and harnessing that so that we can deliver a lower carbon future. Next slide, please. But importantly, we want to make sure, as part of our growth plans, that we're not necessarily stimulating new demand, but we're doing the right thing for our region and making sure that we're capturing, wherever possible, the existing demand from our region. Never ceases to amaze me that the best part of 8 million people travel from our region and our catchment area to the London area, predominantly Heathrow and Gatwick. And that's split about 50% between short and long haul, which we'll touch on in a second. And you'll have seen our recent announcement with Lufthansa to service the need into southern Germany to Frankfurt, which is due to commence at the end of June. And we're actually actively exploring, and I look forward to sharing with you in the next few months, at least one other new route announcement, which will be new for this region and will represent a segue to highlight, how hopefully you can feel more proud of our airport and the worldwide connections which can be afforded through Bristol Airport into the future. Just picking up briefly before the next slide, I sometimes have people highlighting to me, but why can't we allow people to go to Heathrow and Gatwick? They have much better rail connectivity, for instance, which they do. There's no two ways about it. The Heathrow Express, the Gatwick Express, but they're not really formatted for people from our region. That's just a reality, and I'm sure there will be, in the fullness of time, rail access from our part of the world to Heathrow, but that's probably 10 plus years away at the earliest. And as a result, the public transport percentage is pretty small and not that much greater than what we're actually delivering for ourselves here in our region to Bristol. On the next slide just gives you a little bit more colour and insight in terms of both at Heathrow and Gatwick, the degree of short-haul traffic. So that's the green bars here. So you can see there are multi-millions of people who are currently travelling long distances, predominantly by private car. And we've worked with a company to estimate what the degree of CO2 is produced associated with travelling to the southeast of England, which is just under 160,000 tonnes of CO2. So we don't believe that's sustainable. We believe by capturing that demand, or some of that demand from our airport, is the right thing to do for our region. Next slide, please. So looking to the future, I'm sure some of you, it won't come as any surprise that we're heading towards our planning appeal in the middle of this summer. Why is it important for our region? Well, I think at the beginning, Richard, you highlighted one of the disappointments from the budget around the Freeport decision yesterday. It's important that we have to shout even louder and make sure we are levelling up our region. And, our investors, private investors, aren't dependent on the exchequer, and we need to make sure that we're facilitating inward investment. We've heard from John a few minutes ago around the opportunity which we've partnered with Visit West for the future around inbound tourism to grow our region, but importantly to do it in a more sustainable way and supporting greener jobs, working with local companies. The use of hydrogen or electric for the future is absolutely fundamental. I'm not sure, if I'm honest, quite yet, which way that will go for shorter haul European air travel. That will be determined, by the experts in our region. But we need to make sure that we're levelling up our region. We all know how difficult that is for the west and the southwest of the UK to get its fair share in the future. But importantly, the development of the airport will deliver more roles, more jobs. And if people are thinking, well, where are those jobs coming from? Give you an example. Jet2 announced services from Bristol commencing this year. They've been applying and going out to the job market for 200 jobs already. Next slide, please. And we shouldn't forget, we don't sit in isolation. So there are a number of other airports who have been progressing and are progressing at the moment, their aspirations. And, you know, they do have backing from their local communities. You can see here in all different geographic elements across the UK at the moment in terms of where those applications are. They need to be measured, and we believe our approach is a measured approach backed up by a fully sustainable plan for the future. But importantly, working with companies in our region, we've got the greatest opportunity of any region to deliver a sustainable aviation sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really helpful insights as to the way in which you've been developing your plans and proposals, but also transforming the airport's operations as well, and also how we are working with other partners in the region to look at aviation as a totality. Really fascinating to see how that has unfolded. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. I just think we'll move on to some questions if that's okay. And Dave, there have been a couple in the chat just to build on, I think, the points you are making around the carbon neutral goals and how you're looking at the two issues between operations and more widely flights. And so your ambitions to carbon neutrality, are they linked to the flights or to the operations? I wonder if you could perhaps just clarify Diana's question, if that's okay, Dave.
Yeah, no, we actually consider the flights within our net carbon emissions target for the future by 2050, and that aligns with what's been set out by Sustainable Aviation, but also around the Climate Change Commission as well. Albeit the Climate Change Commission, it's an interesting point around international aviation from the Kyoto Agreement. People may recall the Kyoto Agreement. Many years ago, it was felt from an international perspective that that was not to be dealt with domestically, but on a worldwide basis, given some of the challenges around international aviation.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Well, I'm going to open up the floor to others for any questions. Please either raise a hand or put a note in the text box. I'm going to just move on because we have received a question from Richard Harris, and he's the Chief Exec at City of Bristol College. So this is a question to John Hirst, and perhaps even Dave, from your perspective, you might have a view on this as well. But Richard's question was actually with the impact of the pandemic and the visitor economy, that sector supports a lot of young people into work in our area, and actually, how are we thinking about how we could develop the skills that they need to pursue rewarding careers in tourism and leisure? And I wondered, John, if you've got a view to that, and whether, Dave, you might have any thoughts as well, actually.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's thank you to two Richards there, really. But we're in a situation with tourism where I think one of the failures for me over the last 2 decades is to engage sufficiently with young people and encourage them into the industry. I mean, we've tried so hard, and I know that I've worked to some extent with Richard, and he's really positive. And Richard Harris, I'm talking about now, and you, Richard. But you know, we've worked with the college a little bit, and but we haven't yet found the way in to encourage young people from this region into our sector. And if you took a snapshot of many of the people that work in our sector when we were buoyant back in 2019, lots of them didn't originate from this part of the world, and many of them were from Europe and from, you know, so different countries in Europe. And you know, why can't we actually manage to break through that barrier and encourage people into our sector? And I think there's work to be done on that one yet. And my final point would be that some of the colleges have approached this better than others. I think some of the educational establishments and some of the colleges have just not really taken it seriously enough, and City of Bristol have, and Western College have as well, particularly. But we still haven't managed to convert enough people into the sector. And I just would ask people to give it a chance, because it's a great industry to work in, and there are some great opportunities, and we've got some really good people that could stand up as role models to say, well, I started off at the bottom, worked my way to the very top, and I'm now earning good money in a really good industry, good sector.
Thank you, John. And Dave, do you have any views in terms of perhaps pathways through your own organisation?
Yeah, I think, I mean, John's spoken about tourism. We partner with colleges in the region, and I think John's right. It's in terms of, it's got to be led by business, leaning into the colleges, making it very clear what those opportunities are is absolutely key.
Thank you. And Richard, is there anything you want to come back on from what you've just heard?
Just to say thank you to Dave and John for the comments there. I think my question was submitted before we had the roadmap out of lockdown, and certainly before the very positive presentations from John and Dave. I would agree wholeheartedly that the more we can do to emphasise the career choice within the visitor economy and travel and tourism, and the more we can use case studies of how people have progressed, then that will surely open up avenues for our young people.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to just reach out to a couple of people. I'm going to ask John Wright, who works for Stride Trugland, who recently secured B Corp status like us, if that's okay. And John, I'd be really interested to just hear very briefly as to why you thought it was important and what benefits you think might be secured.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Richard.
I thought I would do that.
It's a process that I suppose it's almost it's a midpoint on a journey. We were looking for something that would certify, codify, clarify the work that we've done recently on the sort of the 3 Ps: the people, the planet, and profit. And that's what underpins B Corp for us. It's not about sort of hair shirts and sandal wearing and lentils. It's actually about a proper sensible business decision that kind of underlines what we've been doing over the years, and becoming employee owned, actually pushing sustainability in the way we run our business, but also obviously in the projects that we are able to influence when we design them. And B Corp just offers that that internationally recognized certification around that. And actually for me personally, the sort of certification bit is actually fantastic, because we haven't done anything special to get there. We've just gone through all the processes that we currently do and got them all into line and got certified, and now we're in that place where we can step forward and actually improve that. It also opens us up to actually finding a like-minded community in the business world, which I think, Business West got certified, Breeddog got certified the day after us, I think. So we celebrated with their lovely beer, and it's finding. I think it's just giving purpose to what we do beyond kind of just what we do, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think congratulations, and I know there are other organisations who've just recently achieved that. I think it's a very positive statement. So well done. And I just consciously only got a couple of minutes left, but I'm really pleased that Thangham's joined us today, one of our local MPs. And Thangham, I just wonder if you might just have any reflections, perhaps on the budget or other sort of matters that might, from a Westminster perspective, that we might just welcome sharing with us.
For sure. Thank you, Richard. I mean, first of all, I just want to say to John Hirst, I know you're going on to lovely things. Golf and marathons are fantastic, but it's a great sadness for most, I think for just about everybody else. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is going to join with me in feeling sad for me, happy for you, but you've done an amazing job and you've been a real joy and an inspiration to work with, and we owe you a great debt. So on behalf of the tourism, hospitality, arts and culture industry, and certainly in my patch, Godspeed.
Thank you.
Come to me for marathon sponsoring, because I've just had to turn down my marathon place for this year, which is making me sad. Anyway, in relation to the budget, which I think is probably what you want to know most about, I mean, obviously it was a merely interesting mixed bag. It's good that so much business support and individual support is continuing. There's obviously some tapering for some things, but cliff edges for others, which will be a worry. I think in terms of market stability and consumer confidence, there will come some difficult moments, I think, in the autumn. Certainly the IFS briefing that I was on this morning, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, they were expressing a sort of cautious welcome for some things and a real feeling of anxiety for others. There is obviously going to be, if the Chancellor is going to stick to his targets, he will have to institute some pretty swinging cuts to public spending over the next few years. And if you take out the things which he really can't cut politically, like schools and the NHS and the care service after the year we've just had, that leaves some things which might affect some people on this call, like local government, housing. Certainly the budget line, the department I shadow, MHCLG, there is already a cut planned, and I think that's going to have an impact, which we just need to be aware of. Many of you will have been disappointed at the news that Bristol didn't get a free port. And I think I'm not quite sure yet. I haven't been able to find out yet what the reasoning was. I was also disappointed not to see a commitment, named commitment to Temple Quarter regeneration. A lot of you have put a lot of work into that. It's in my patch. Obviously, I desperately want that to happen. It's the end. We're not at the end yet. We've got a long way to go, I think, but it does feel like we're clinging on sometimes. And I'd love to work with any of you who want to sort of help try and keep going. We need to keep going. It's a big thing and it's a big deal and it's a good thing for our region. The Temple Quarter isn't just about Bristol West or Bristol, it is about the region, which I'm sure you know. In terms of where we're going with other measures announced by the Chancellor yesterday, I think the super thing, that's a mixed bag. I think we might see people bringing forward expenditure on plant that perhaps then leads to, not done in a planned way just because we know it's time limited. I'm not against it. I think investing in capital infrastructure is obviously a good thing, but it worries me a little bit that what's coming down the line then is a very big tax hike for businesses in a few years' time, and I'm concerned also about some of the implications for what happens, as I said, at the end of the cliff edge that I think there is going to be when coronavirus support stops. You all need a strong economy. I want a strong economy. That's how we get the jobs and growth that we need. We've got a lot of work to do to get through the next few months. I know I'm looking at a screen full of people who I desperately want to see and have a cup of coffee with in real life. We will do this. In the meantime, thank you to all colleagues for what you've been doing, the creative ways that you've been working throughout this crisis. It's been a tough year. I sat through the Chancellor's budget speech a year ago in the chamber thinking this ain't going to last long, and it lasted 4 hours. And now we're through, hopefully through the worst, but there are a few rocks ahead yet. And I think particularly for colleagues who've been in industries really badly hit, we need to keep working together. And I'm grateful to Business West for all you've been doing at keeping us going. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much for that. Really helpful. And just with regards to Temple Quarter, we were equally disappointed, and we'll be reaching out to you. We're very keen to make sure that government understand the support that the business community brings, so we'll definitely connect with you around that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, everybody who's contributed. It's been a really full and packed day. I'm sorry I've not kept us quite to time. Do blame the chair. We are now going to hand over to Victoria and the team for anybody who would like to stay. We've got half an hour of chats through the little chat rooms, which is quite a nice way to connect with one or two people that you might not have seen for a little while. So thank you to John, Matt, and to Dave. We've really enjoyed your inputs today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you, everybody. Great stuff. So Victoria, if I can hand over to you and Libby, that'd be